The mid-morning rush at Silverline National Bank was its usual blend of quiet tension and clicking heels. The lobby gleamed with polished marble floors and glass walls that reflected the soft sunlight spilling through the tall windows. Behind the counter, Claire Weston, the bank's youngest teller, adjusted her blazer and straightened the Employee of the Month badge pinned proudly to her chest. She was 26, ambitious, and determined to rise through the ranks. Claire had worked hard for this job. Coming from a modest background, she prided herself on never cutting corners and never missing a chance to impress her superiors. Especially the branch manager, Mr. Daniels, a sharp man in his 50s with a reputation for being both cold and calculating. She smiled politely at the man in front of her, a real estate agent depositing a 5-figure check, and handed him his receipt. Then the next customer stepped forward. It was a woman, older, dressed simply. Her coat was faded, her hands calloused. Her hair, once black, had streaks of silver that caught the morning light. She held a worn leather purse, clutching it close to her chest. "Good morning," Claire said, keeping her voice professional. The woman smiled gently. "Morning, dear. I'd like to apply for a small business loan." Claire glanced at her clothes, then back at her face. "Of course. May I see some identification and proof of income?" The woman nodded and opened her purse, carefully pulling out documents. A small stack of handwritten receipts, tax papers, and a faded business license. "My name's Evelyn Carter," she said proudly. "I run a catering service out of my home, well, used to. I'm hoping to open a small storefront. I've saved what I can, but I just need a little help to get started." Claire scanned the papers, her expression tightening. "Ms. Carter, it says here your revenue last year was only $12,000. "Yes, but that was before I got 2 new contracts, the community center and the school cafeteria. If I could get a proper kitchen, I could triple that. I just need $10,000 to get going." Claire sighed, forcing a polite smile. "And your collateral?" Evelyn hesitated. "My house. It's small, but it's fully paid off." That made Claire pause for a second. That kind of security usually mattered. But still, the numbers didn't add up. She knew what her manager would say: high risk, low reward. She looked up from the papers. "Ms. Carter, I'm afraid your business income doesn't meet our minimum threshold, and your savings are limited." Evelyn's hopeful expression flickered. "I've been with this bank for 30 years. I've never missed a payment in my life. Doesn't that count for something?" Claire forced a sympathetic look, lowering her voice so others wouldn't hear. "It's not personal. It's just policy. I can submit the application, but it's unlikely to be approved." The old woman's shoulders sank slightly. "Please," she said softly. "I've worked hard all my life. I'm not asking for charity, just a chance." Claire hesitated for a brief moment. Then, like she'd been trained, she leaned toward professionalism, not compassion. "I'm sorry, Ms. Carter. Without a stronger financial record, there's nothing I can do." The woman nodded quietly, gathering her papers with trembling hands. "I understand," she whispered. But as she turned to leave, something about her eyes lingered. Not sadness, not defeat, but quiet resolve. Claire watched her go, shaking her head. "People need to be more realistic," she muttered under her breath. Mr. Daniels approached her from behind. "What was that about?" "Just an old lady trying to get a loan she couldn't possibly afford," Claire replied. Daniels smirked. "You did the right thing. We don't fund dreams. We fund results." Claire smiled faintly, feeling validated. "Of course, sir." He nodded approvingly and walked off, leaving Claire to her thoughts. But as the day went on, that woman's face wouldn't leave her mind. Something about the way she'd said, "I've been with this bank for 30 years," echoed in her ears, felt heavy. That night, as Claire counted her drawer and closed up her station, she noticed a small, handwritten note someone had left behind. It was on the old-fashioned withdrawal form, and at the bottom, in careful cursive, it said, "Thank you for your time. I'll find another way. E.C." Claire stared at it for a moment, unsure why it bothered her. Maybe it was the politeness. Maybe it was the quiet dignity. Or maybe, deep down, it was the uncomfortable truth that she had turned away someone who reminded her of her own mother. Outside, rain began to fall, streaking across the glass windows of the bank. And somewhere across town, Evelyn Carter was sitting at her small kitchen table, the same papers spread out before her. Only this time she wasn't crying. She was making calls. Serious ones. She kept a secret for 30 years, one that not even the bank's highest executives knew. And by morning, the balance of power at Silverline National Bank was about to change forever. Machine's word. The security guards greeted early customers, and Claire Weston settled behind her counter, ready for another routine day. She tried to shake off the nagging thought of Evelyn Carter, the old woman with the trembling hands and unwavering eyes. But as Claire logged into her system, she noticed something strange on her screen. An internal memo from corporate headquarters. Urgent notice. Executive evaluation and ownership review scheduled for this week. All employees are expected to maintain full professionalism. She raised an eyebrow. Ownership review? That wasn't something that happened often, and never at the branch level. Before she could think about it further, Mr. Daniels, the branch manager, strode out of his glass office with that smug air of authority that made everyone's shoulders tighten. "All right, people," he barked. "Corporate's sending down one of the new majority shareholders for an unscheduled inspection. We don't know when, we don't know who. Just make sure this place looks perfect." A nervous chuckle went through the staff. "Majority shareholder?" someone whispered. "Like, someone who owns the bank?" Claire shrugged. "Whoever it is, Daniels will probably faint trying to impress them." Daniels shot her a sharp look. "Careful, Weston. Keep the jokes to yourself. We've got serious eyes watching us now." Claire forced a polite smile. "Of course, sir." The morning passed in a blur of customers and deposits, until around noon, when a sleek black car pulled up outside the bank. Through the glass, Claire could see two men in suits step out, followed by a woman in a long beige coat and dark sunglasses. The atmosphere in the lobby changed instantly. Employees straightened, conversations hushed. Daniels practically ran to the door, shaking hands and offering a nervous laugh. "Welcome. Welcome to Silverline's main branch. I'm Mr. Daniels, the branch manager." The woman nodded slightly but said nothing. She removed her sunglasses, and Claire froze. It was Evelyn Carter. Gone was the simple coat and faded purse. Her hair was pinned neatly, her clothes sharp and elegant. She carried herself with quiet confidence, not the nervousness of a lone applicant, but the authority of someone who belonged there. Claire's jaw slackened. "No, it can't be." Daniels, oblivious, continued smiling. "And you are?" Evelyn's smile was gentle but knowing. "Evelyn Carter. I believe I have a meeting with your regional director. And yourself." Daniels blinked rapidly, clearly confused. "Oh, of course. Right this way, Ms. Carter." As he led her toward the conference room, Claire caught a brief glance from Evelyn, calm, poised, almost amused. It was the kind of look that said, "Remember me?" Inside the conference room, the blinds were drawn, and whispers filled the air. 20 minutes later, Daniels emerged, face pale as paper. He walked past the counters in stunned silence, ignoring everyone. Claire watched him retreat into his office before curiosity got the better of her. She leaned toward her coworker. "Do you know what that was about?" Her coworker shrugged. "No idea," but whatever she said shook him up. He looked like he just saw a ghost. Moments later, Daniels called her name from across the lobby. "Claire, my office. Now." She stood quickly, smoothing her skirt, and walked in. Daniels closed the door behind her and lowered his voice. "Do you remember that woman yesterday? The one you turned down?" Claire nodded hesitantly. Yes, Evelyn Carter. He leaned over his desk, whispering sharply. That Evelyn Carter owns controlling shares in the bank's holding company. She's not a client, Weston. She's technically our boss. Claire's mouth went dry. What? Daniels rubbed his forehead. Apparently, she's been part of a silent ownership group for over 15 years. Inherited her late husband's equity. She's one of the founder's heirs, and I had no idea. Claire's knees nearly gave out. You're saying she owns the bank? He nodded slowly. Exactly. And she just requested a copy of your interaction notes from yesterday. Claire's heart dropped into her stomach. Sir, Daniels cut her off. Don't explain. Just hope she's merciful. Because if she decides to make a statement, it won't just be my job on the line, it'll be yours too. He sank into his chair, defeated. I've been managing this branch for 20 years. And today, I found out I've been working for the woman you turned away like a beggar. Claire felt a rush of nausea. What did she say? Daniels looked up slowly. She said she'd be coming back tomorrow, personally, to discuss a few changes. Outside, the sound of typing and chatter went on as usual. But inside Claire's head, all she could hear was the echo of her own voice from yesterday. Without a stronger financial record, there's nothing I can do. She swallowed hard. Sir, what do we do? Daniels gave a bitter laugh. You apologize, Weston, and you pray she accepts it. As Claire left his office, she caught a glimpse of the reflection on the glass wall, her once confident face now pale and tense. For the first time since she joined the bank, she wasn't thinking about promotions or praise. She was thinking about humility, and she had a feeling tomorrow would teach her what it really meant. The next morning, Silverline National Bank felt different. Even before the doors opened, tension filled the air like a heavy fog. The tellers whispered quietly among themselves, adjusting their ties and double-checking every transaction slip, while the assistant manager made sure the lobby smelled like fresh flowers. Claire Weston, however, barely slept the night before. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Evelyn Carter's calm, unreadable smile. The same woman she'd dismissed as not bankable. Now that woman was her boss. At 9:01 sharp, the front doors opened, and the quiet hum of the lobby began. 5 minutes later, the sleek black car from yesterday pulled up once again. Out stepped Evelyn Carter, elegant, composed, and exuding the kind of authority that didn't need to be announced. 2 executives from headquarters followed her, along with a young man holding a briefcase. Mr. Daniels rushed to greet her at the door, his voice trembling slightly. Ms. Carter, welcome back. It's an honor to have you here. Evelyn smiled politely. Thank you, Mr. Daniels. Let's not make this a performance. I'm here to observe, not to be flattered. Her tone wasn't harsh. It was calm, almost gentle, but it carried a weight that made everyone in the room instinctively straighten up. Claire stood behind her counter, hands clasped tightly together, heart pounding. Evelyn's eyes eventually found hers, and in that one look, Claire knew she remembered everything. Daniels gestured nervously toward his office. Right this way, ma'am. I have the financial reports you requested. Evelyn walked past the counters, her heels tapping rhythmically against the marble floor. But halfway to the office, she paused, right in front of Claire. For a few seconds, silence filled the entire lobby. Every employee pretended to work while secretly watching. Ms. Weston, isn't it? Evelyn said softly. Claire swallowed hard. Yes, ma'am. Evelyn tilted her head slightly, studying her. I believe we met a few days ago. Claire's voice cracked. Yes, we did, ma'am. I want to apologize for how I spoke to you. I should have been more understanding. Evelyn smiled faintly, her expression unreadable. You were doing your job, weren't you? Yes, ma'am. But sometimes, doing your job isn't the same as doing what's right. Evelyn interrupted gently. Claire lowered her gaze, cheeks burning. I understand that now. Evelyn gave a small nod, then turned to Daniels. I'd like to start by reviewing customer service performance records for the last quarter. I'm particularly interested in how your employees treat small business clients. Daniels stiffened. Of course, ma'am. They disappeared into his office. The glass walls didn't block sound perfectly, and the rest of the staff could hear snippets of their conversation. Words like discrimination, ethical review, and community engagement floated through the air. After nearly an hour, Daniel stepped out, his face pale and tight. Evelyn followed, still calm, carrying a folder. I'll be making several structural changes to this branch, she announced. Effective immediately. Daniels forced a smile. Of course, Miss Carter. Anything you recommend. Evelyn turned toward the staff, her voice clear but not cruel. For years, this bank has profited from its community, but has not truly served it. That changes today. She placed the folder on the counter in front of Claire. Starting next week, we'll launch a new small business program, low-interest loans for working-class entrepreneurs. I want this branch to lead the pilot project. Claire blinked. Us? Yes, Ms. Weston. You'll oversee it. The words hit her like a jolt. Me? Ma'am, Evelyn smiled knowingly. You have potential. You're sharp, efficient. But you need to learn something this place forgot long ago, that numbers are only half of the story. People are the other half. Claire's throat tightened. Thank you, ma'am. I won't let you down. I know you won't, Evelyn said simply. As Evelyn turned to leave, Daniels looked desperate. Miss Carter, if I may. She stopped and faced him. Mr. Daniels, you've been with this bank for 2 decades. You know every policy, every loophole, and every profit margin. But tell me, how many people do you actually remember? He hesitated, eyes darting to the floor. Evelyn sighed softly. That's what's wrong with this place. Somewhere along the way, compassion stopped being profitable. She looked around at the entire staff. That ends today. With that, she walked out, calm, poised, unshaken. For a moment, no one moved. Then Claire exhaled, almost in disbelief. She'd expected anger, revenge, humiliation. Instead, Evelyn Carter had shown nothing but grace, and that somehow felt heavier than any punishment. Later that afternoon, Claire found herself sitting alone at her counter, replaying the moment over and over. Evelyn hadn't scolded her. She'd trusted her, and that trust felt like a test. That night, Claire opened her laptop and began drafting a new outreach plan for local businesses. She worked until midnight, driven by something new. Not ambition, not fear, but purpose. Somewhere across town, Evelyn sat in her study, reviewing a stack of reports. When she reached Claire's file, she paused and smiled softly. She'll figure it out, Evelyn said quietly. Just like I once had to. Because years ago, Evelyn Carter had been dismissed too, by the same kind of people who thought kindness didn't belong in business. Now she was rewriting the rules. By the end of the week, Silverline National Bank was buzzing with rumors. Some said the regional director had been replaced. Others whispered that Evelyn Carter was preparing to make big moves. But the one thing everyone knew for sure was that change had arrived, and nothing at that branch would ever be the same again. Claire Weston felt it most of all. Every morning now, she came to work early, her usual rush replaced with quiet focus. She no longer saw her customers as lines of numbers or forms to be processed. She saw faces, stories, and people trying to build something out of their struggles. But while the rest of the staff adjusted, Mr. Daniels wasn't taking it so well. His pride had taken a public hit. He avoided Evelyn's name like a curse, speaking of her decisions as if they were some form of punishment. One Friday morning, as Claire finished helping a young single mother apply for a small business grant, something that would have been impossible a week ago, Daniels called her into his office. Weston, he said curtly, I've been reviewing your new program proposals. Some of these terms are generous. She nodded. That's the idea, sir. Ms. Carter wanted us to make access easier for small business owners. I know what she said, Daniels interrupted sharply. But we're not a charity. The bank has to make money. Claire straightened, keeping her voice steady. With all due respect, sir, Miss Carter didn't say we should lose money. She said we should earn trust. Daniel's jaw tightened. You're becoming quite bold lately, aren't you? Just trying to do my job, she replied evenly. Daniels smirked bitterly. Funny. That's exactly what you said when you turned her down. That hit hard. Claire swallowed her pride and kept her composure. And I was wrong then. I don't plan to be again. Daniels leaned back in his chair. You really think she's here to save this place? She's a businesswoman, Weston. When she's done with her little charity project, she'll cut half the staff, including you. Claire didn't respond. She just gathered her folder and stood. If that happens, at least I'll know I did something worth remembering. Before Daniels could answer, there was a soft knock on the door. It opened and Evelyn Carter herself stepped in. Am I interrupting? She asked politely. Daniels shot up from his chair. Ms. Carter, not at all. We were just discussing your exit paperwork, she said calmly. The color drained from his face. Excuse me? Evelyn set a folder on his desk. Corporate reviewed your branch reports and client history. You've been rejecting community-based loans at 5 times the national average. You've cost this branch not only business but reputation. Daniels stammered. Ms. Carter, you can't. I can, she interrupted softly. And I already have. The board has approved your early retirement package. He blinked in disbelief. You're firing me? Evelyn's tone remained composed. Let's call it releasing you to explore new opportunities. You've had 20 years to build this branch into something meaningful, Mr. Daniels. Instead, you built walls. Daniels' voice broke slightly. You're making a mistake. Evelyn's gaze was steady. The mistake was letting arrogance run a place meant to help people. She turned toward Claire. Ms. Weston, please have HR assist Mr. Daniels with his transition paperwork. And then, I'd like to speak with you privately. Daniels stood frozen as Evelyn left the room. Claire hesitated for a second, then followed her into the lobby. When they reached the main floor, Evelyn stopped near the counter, right where their first conversation had taken place days ago. Do you know why I gave you that program, Claire? She asked. Claire shook her head. Because you saw I was sorry? Evelyn smiled softly. No, because I saw potential. I saw a young woman making the same mistake I once did. Claire blinked, surprised. You? Evelyn nodded. When I was your age, I worked at a small bank downtown. One afternoon, a man walked in asking for a loan. A mechanic who could barely read the forms. I laughed at him, politely, of course. Told him to come back when he had something real. He left quietly, just like I did years later, when the bank I worked for went under. She paused, looking around the bright lobby. I learned then that intelligence means nothing if you don't have empathy. You can build a business without compassion, but you can't keep one. Claire listened, her chest tightening. You could have embarrassed me, Miss Carter, but you didn't. Evelyn's eyes softened. Humiliation doesn't change people. Understanding does. You already punished yourself enough. Claire's voice wavered. I'll spend the rest of my career trying to earn that second chance. Evelyn smiled faintly. Then you'll do well, and you'll help others do better. For the first time since their first meeting, Claire saw not a powerful business owner standing before her, but a teacher. A woman who'd walked through humiliation, failure, and loss, and come out the other side with quiet grace. As Evelyn turned to leave, she paused near the front door. Oh, and Ms. Weston? Yes, ma'am. Evelyn gave a small, knowing smile. Try to remember next time. Wealth isn't always worn on the outside. The doors closed behind her, leaving Claire standing in silence. For the rest of the day, no one spoke much about what had happened. But the news spread quietly. The old woman who'd been denied a loan now owned the very institution that had once rejected her, and she had rewritten its story from the inside out. And for Claire Weston, that was the day she learned that success wasn't about climbing. It was about lifting. 2 weeks later, Silverline National Bank didn't look the same anymore. The glossy marble still gleamed, but the mood, the air itself, had changed. For the first time in years, customers were greeted with real smiles, not rehearsed ones. The staff moved with purpose, not fear. And the new sign above the customer service counter read, "Community first, people before profit." Claire Weston stood behind the desk, watching a line of customers waiting patiently for loan consultations. Most were small business owners, bakers, mechanics, single parents, the kind of people who never would have gotten a second glance in Daniel's era. And now, because of Evelyn Carter, they were being heard. Claire flipped through a report showing an uptick in local loan approvals and a 37% increase in customer retention. It wasn't just the numbers that made her proud. It was the names behind those numbers. A single mom opening a daycare, a retired teacher starting a reading center, a young man with a landscaping truck and a dream. Each success story reminded her of Evelyn's words. You can build a business without compassion, but you can't keep one. At exactly 3 p.m., the glass doors opened and sunlight poured into the lobby. Evelyn Carter stepped in, her steps slow but confident, her signature beige coat draped elegantly over her shoulders. "Ms. Carter," Claire greeted warmly. "I didn't expect to see you today." Evelyn smiled. "I wanted to see how my favorite project was doing." Claire chuckled nervously. "If you're here to inspect, I think you'll be pleasantly surprised." Evelyn walked along the counter, scanning the activity. She paused to watch a teller patiently helping an elderly couple fill out a form. She smiled, clearly satisfied. "This," she said softly, "is what a bank should look like. Not fear, not ego, just service." Claire nodded. "It's strange. You'd think teaching people to care would be simple. But it's the hardest part." Evelyn turned to her. "That's because caring doesn't fit neatly on a balance sheet." They shared a quiet laugh. After a moment, Claire asked the question she'd been holding on to for days. "Ms. Carter, why did you come back here at all? You could have fired everyone that day and walked away." Evelyn's expression softened, her gaze drifting to the sunlight filtering through the glass. "Because I needed to see if change was still possible, not just in this bank, but in people. I've had all the wealth anyone could dream of, Claire. But what I really wanted was to make sure that what happened to me, being dismissed, belittled, unseen, wouldn't keep happening to others." She turned to Claire, eyes kind but piercing. "And that starts with people like you." Claire looked down, humbled. "You gave me a chance when I didn't deserve one." "No," Evelyn corrected gently. "I reminded you what it feels like to be seen. That's all most people ever need." Before Claire could respond, a commotion drew their attention to the lobby doors. A young man in overalls entered, his boots dusty, his hands calloused, the kind of customer who might have once been turned away. He hesitated at the counter, hat in hand. "Ma'am," he said softly, "I'm here about that small business program. I'm starting a mobile car wash. I don't have much." Evelyn smiled and gestured for Claire to handle it. Claire approached the man with a warmth she hadn't known she possessed months ago. "You've come to the right place," she said. "Let's get you started." As she walked him through the process, Evelyn watched quietly, proud, but not possessive. The cycle had completed. The woman who had once been denied compassion had taught compassion itself to an entire institution. An hour later, as Evelyn prepared to leave, Claire handed her a small envelope. "Before you go, I wanted to give you something." Evelyn opened it and found a handwritten note, framed with care. "To the woman who turned rejection into revolution." Signed, the Silverline staff. For the first time in years, Evelyn's composure faltered. Her eyes glistened. "Thank you, Claire. This means more than you know." She turned to leave, but before walking out, she added softly, "You know, I think it's time I officially retire." Claire blinked. "Retire? But you just transformed everything." Evelyn chuckled. "Exactly. My work here is done. It's time for new hands to carry the torch." Claire hesitated. "Who'll take over?" Evelyn looked at her meaningfully. "I have someone in mind." Took a moment for the words to sink in. "Me?" Claire whispered. Evelyn nodded with a smile. "Who better than someone who's seen both sides? The arrogance and the awakening." The sunlight caught her silver hair as she stepped outside. "Remember this, Claire. Titles fade, but integrity lasts. Lead with both." And with that, Evelyn Carter, once dismissed as an unworthy borrower, walked into the daylight, leaving behind not just a thriving bank, but a living legacy. Claire stood in the doorway watching her go. Then she looked back at the staff, the customers, and the place that had changed her life. The bank that used to serve wealth now served worth. She smiled, remembering the day Evelyn had first walked in with trembling hands and quiet strength. That moment had felt ordinary, but it had rewritten everything. As the sun set over the glass facade, Claire turned the open sign to closed and whispered to herself, "The day I turned her away was the day my life began." The story that started with arrogance had ended in awakening, not just for one woman, but for everyone who had ever forgotten that dignity doesn't wear a price tag. Because sometimes the poorest person in the room is the richest in spirit. And sometimes the one you dismiss owns the building you're standing in.